Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's edition of my top waiver wire targets and streamable defenses for week 17 of this NFL season, also known as championship week. So, if you are watching this video, congratulations on winning your championship. So, I am going to dive into today's video. It might be a quick one. It's the holiday week. I'm visiting my family, as you can tell, with the new background. And just as a reminder, I don't think you should be picking up players off the waivers to play in your lineup unless you're dealing with injuries, unless you've been streaming the quarterback position or the tight end position this season. So, with that being said, my quarterback ad of the week, I am going to go with Sam Darnold. He's available. He's only rostered on, oh, yeah. Again, these players, they have to have at least 50% roster availability per ESPN leagues for me to speak about. On that, Sam Darnold is only rostered on 43.4% of the rosters. This past weekend against the Rams, actually this past Thursday night, he threw for 270 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and he had those 2 picks. But as we know with quarterbacks, interceptions don't really matter too much unless you do play in a league where they hurt you on the scoreboard. With that being said, why I like Darnold this week, if you are streaming a quarterback, he's at least finished with 240 passing yards in 5 of his last 6 games. So that does give you a good floor, despite having a tough matchup on paper, facing a Panthers defense who have allowed the 8th fewest points per game against the quarterback position. My running back out of the week is going to be Tajay Spears. He's only rostered on 30.7% of the rosters. Past weekend against that Chiefs defense, he had 13 rushes for 52 yards and a touchdown. He also had 5 receptions for 53 yards and 5 targets in that game. He's gotten at least 10 touches over in 2 of his last 3 games, so you do like that. He does draw a good matchup where he is facing the Saints defense, who have allowed the 12th most points per game against the running back position. If you're desperate for a flex play, I would consider him. But another thing I did forget to mention, if your opponent this week in your championship game needs a running back, a wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end, you have other positions that you know he's not going to pick up and you're not going to play those players, consider poaching some players to prevent him from playing them. So that's something to also consider with a guy like Spears if your opponent might be looking to pick up a running back and put him in his lineup this week. My wide receiver out of the week, necessarily don't really always love the third wide receiver now that they do have Myers and Brian Thomas Jr., but you can't ignore what Parker Washington is doing with Trevor Lawrence right now. He's only rostered on 12.9% of the rosters. This past weekend, he had 6 receptions for 145 yards and 10 targets against that Broncos defense. He's actually finished with at least 50 plus receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games. And he draws a great matchup where you could maybe play him in your flex this week. He's going against a Colts defense who have allowed the 4th most points per game against wide receivers this year. Then my tight end of the week, I'm going with one of the targets for Sam Darnold in Seattle, A.J. Barner. He's only rostered on 15.7% of the rosters. This past weekend, or the past Thursday night against the Rams, he had 4 receptions for 49 yards on 6 targets. He's actually gotten at least 5 plus targets in 4 of his last 6 games. What I kind of like too about him is if they decide to go with the tush push, he's the guy doing the tush push. So, most of the time that ends up in 1 to 2 yards. But if there's a situation they get on the goal line and they want to run the tush push, you could maybe potentially get an easy touchdown from him. And they're going against the Panthers. They're about a middle pack of the tight end position, but if you've been streaming a tight end, you want a tight end that has been at least seeing consistent targets over the last month or so, A.J. Barner would be a decent option to turn to. And a guy that's been on this waiver wire video for 5 weeks straight, I think, at this point. Blake Corum, he does pop up again. You guys know I do love this kid. He's only rostered on 29.9% of the rosters. Past Thursday night game, he had the 4 rushes for 48 yards and a touchdown. He had 1 reception for 13 yards on 2 targets. Even with Kieran Williams as a starting running back, over the last 3 games, Corum has touched the ball 11 times, at least 11 times. They're more likely going to still be without Devontae this week, so they're going to lean into that rushing attack. So I do think Corum is a decent flex play if you need somebody. Going against the Falcons, who have allowed, they're about the middle of the pack against the running back position this season. So yeah, those are my waiver wire targets for week 17 championship week. Moving into my streamable defenses, as a reminder, these streaming defenses is a high risk, high reward proposition. It'll sometimes work out for you in a great way, sometimes it doesn't. Like the Chiefs definitely did not work out for me last week. That was definitely a miss on me. But with that being said, these defenses, they do have to be available in at least 50% of the leagues on ESPN. Couldn't remember if I did say that or not. With that being said, too, before I dive into these 5 defenses, I do understand it's championship week. As the playoffs go on, you have less people competing for either defenses or players on the waiver market. So with that being said, there might be some defenses that don't qualify for my list because they're over the 50% threshold, but they might be available for you. I did check my personal leagues, and I saw some of these defenses out there. So yeah, the 4 defenses I do like, that they're rostered on anywhere between like 55 to 71% of the rosters. The 71% is the Patriots, but I have 2 leagues where the Patriots are out there on the waivers. So yeah, if the Patriots are out there, go grab the Patriots against the Jets. I do like the Steelers defense as well against the Browns this week. Also like the Lions against that Vikings offense, which will more likely have Max Brosmer at the quarterback's position. And then I also do like the Saints defense against the Titans. Again, they don't qualify for the list, so that's why you're not seeing them on this graphic. With that being said, if those 4 defenses are not available for you, these are my other top 5 defenses that qualify underneath the threshold of being available in at least 50% of the leagues on ESPN. Even though that Cowboys defense has not been great this year, they do have a sneaky high ceiling, low floor play this week against the Commanders. Cowboys are in the roster on 25.5% of the rosters right now. Marcus Mariota got hurt in that game. It sounds like it's going to be Josh Johnson starting at quarterback. So the fact that they're down to their 3rd string quarterback, I believe one of their linemen, I think it was Cosme, got hurt in that game as well too. They're so banged up on offense. I would like to see this Cowboys defense take advantage of that and get you sacks and turnovers. And speaking of turnovers, the Commanders actually are tied for the 4th most turnovers in the league. So it has the opportunity where you can maybe get a fumble recovery or a pick turned into a touchdown. My second one, this is going to be very dependent, of course, if Lamar plays. But even if Lamar plays, he hasn't really been 100% since he's returned, and will be coming off an injury. So I'm assuming that Lamar's not playing, so that's why I have the Packers here. But the Packers defense against the Ravens, Packers are only rostered on 49.8% of the rosters. This is a home game for the Packers. Packers are one of those teams that you can factor in the home environment, especially at this point of the schedule. If we get like a snow type of game, like I mentioned, it's more likely to be Snoop Huntley at quarterback, so that makes me like streaming the Packers defense a lot. And then even with or without Lamar, regardless, the Ravens are actually tied for the 3rd most turnovers. So like I mentioned with the Cowboys, you're hoping that a team that's been turning the ball over, that'll happen in this game, especially if there's like if it's a snow game on Saturday night, and then one of those fumbles or picks can turn into a touchdown for you. My number 3 streaming defense is going to be the Titans against the Saints. Titans only roster on 10.5% of the rosters. This is a home game for Tennessee. That's not a big factor for me, especially when they're one of the worst teams in the league. So you don't know if you can really factor in a true home environment. And then basically they're going against the Saints offense. They're tied for the 4th most turnovers. So you're seeing if you can maybe get a turnover into a touchdown. And then what gives them a little bit of a floor, even though you can't necessarily trust this Titans defense, especially with the Saints playing better over this last month. But the Saints still only average 17 points a game, which is the 4th fewest in the NFL. And then in the Big Tank Bowl, where one of these teams will likely end up with the number 1 pick in the next couple of weeks for this upcoming draft, though, I do like the Giants against the Raiders. Giants are rostered on 9.1% of the rosters right now. And it's basically the offense they're playing. I know the Raiders surprisingly had one of their better offensive performances against that Texas defense this past weekend. But we'll have to see if they can back that up with a consistent performance, which we have not seen from this team all year. With that being said, Raiders have allowed the 2nd most sacks in the NFL. So like a guy like Brian Burns getting 2+ sacks in this game to rack up you the points. And what gives this option a potential floor is the Raiders do only score 14.5 points per game this season, which is the fewest in the NFL. Now, this is a this is a really big streaming. This would be like a 14, 16 team league stream option. Again, the options out there are not that great. But if you were to miss out on the four defenses I mentioned before, these five defenses, or if you were to miss out on the Cowboys, Packers, Titans, and Giants, you can consider maybe rolling the dice on the Bengals, who are only rostered on 3.2% of the rosters right now. This is a home game for Cincinnati. Again, they have a bad record. I'm not expecting like a big home crowd with the noise, but this is in Cincinnati. I don't know what the weather forecast is, but that's, again, one of those stadiums that at this point of the year could be a windy factor, which can maybe help create turnovers for the Bengals defense. And then they are going against the Cardinals, who have allowed the fourth most sacks in the NFL. So there's a way you could get points, but I don't love that option. That's like a very desperate last set dart throw if you were to miss out on the defenses. And again, if you guys go to pick up your defenses, again, look for the Patriots, look for the Steelers, look for the Lions, then the Saints. After those four defenses, these would be the five defenses I would consider. With that being said, that wraps up my final waiver wire target and streamable defensive video for this season. Do appreciate you guys watching these videos every Tuesday. Now, I do understand people, which you need to change it. There are Week 18 championship games in some leagues. In case I do have listeners that do play in those leagues, I won't be doing a waiver wire video next week. I just refuse to do that. I will talk about streaming defenses for Week 18, because I do think you can also take the streaming defenses into your daily lineups, where you can get a cheaper option when you stream your defenses on that. But I'm going to combine the streaming defenses with my start sits next week, which, by the way, the start sits and that streaming defense video, that'll come out like either next Friday or Saturday, just depending on how my schedule looks when I get back up down to Florida. But yeah, I will release something at some point next week for anybody that plays Week 18 championship games. And like I always say, you can consider my start sits video for either daily lineups or your prop bets. That being said, I'm gonna get off here. I might be getting my start sits video for you guys later today. If not, I'll be trying to get it out to you as early as possible tomorrow. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace out.